So before we get into the clip that's the subject of the day, I kind of want to show you the clip that spawned the segment that we're going to look at. I'm sure many of you have seen this clip before. It got clipped up everywhere. Everybody posted it. They even already talked about it on TBS. But just for context, anybody who hasn't seen it yet, I did want to show it off here. So this is going to be a clip of his Baldur's Gate 3 gameplay immediately after he rejects Lae'zel's sexual style advances.
Wish you could return.
That is the problem. The dialogue's terrible. Like, you really think that's how she would have reacted? Oh well, just immediately she's like, oh well, I give up. Right? No. The dialogue is bad. I'm sorry, like, that kind of dialogue is so bad. It doesn't feel organic or real. It just feels like some fucking horny nerd wrote that scene because they wanted to have fan service for people who are also horny nerds. Get a better writer to write those scenes and maybe someone would be interested. I don't want to see what a horny nerd thinks of this relationship. Sorry. Sorry. Anyway, let's continue, shall we? Alright. Let's have our full rest here. Someone just said I'm a nerd. Or, excuse me, I'm a prude. No, I'm not a prude. I'm just not a horny nerd. You understand? Like, I actually get laid by my wife. I don't need to have horny nerd fake romance in this game. You get it? So there you go. Oh, look, Scratch has something for me.
So you heard him, folks. He's not interested in any sort of romantic dialogue in video games because it's poorly written for nerds, and he gets laid by his wife, dude, totally. Completely ignore the fact that they have 2 separate bedrooms, allegedly. Like I said, I wanted to show the clip for context so that we can go right into the segment from Snort Hogan. Big ups.
Well, let me tell you something, brother. Snort, snort, snort.
Hogan.
Drip, snort, snort.
I got the drip. Go. For Baldur's Gate 3, I have actually really enjoyed the last few streams. Basically, ever since we left Moonrise Tower, I've had a lot more fun because it's cool to explore this open world, run into a bunch of random encounters, combat, NPCs, little mini dungeons, and things like that. And I like how they all tend to tie into each other in some way. Like, for example, 2 streams ago, we ran into this random kid named Oliver who looked like his body was like half corrupted and he was controlling these shadow demons. Like, what the heck is going on here? And then come to find out, last stream, we actually ran into his other half counterpart, Thaniel. That's right, Thaniel, who apparently was a spiritual being that the druids kind of like work with and worship, who had been split, and you had to go basically reunite him with his other half, the Oliver. It was really neat. I liked that. There are certain things about Baldur's Gate 3 I think are done really, really well.
Every time DSP recaps what happened on a Baldur's Gate 3 stream, you'd think that he actually enjoys the game, because that's what he makes it sound like. But anytime you listen to him talk about Baldur's Gate 3 while he's not actively recapping what happened on the previous stream, when he's just talking about it off the cuff and giving his honest thoughts on the game, he sounds absolutely miserable and like he hates the game. And anytime there's an opportunity for him to point out something that he doesn't like about Baldur's Gate 3, he absolutely seizes the opportunity. He is always on the lookout for something that he can complain about when it comes to one of the best games of the year, if not the game of the year, being that it did in fact win game of the year. If he was just upfront and honest about his true feelings of the game, then I really wouldn't have nearly as large of a problem as I do now. My problem is the fact that he continues to act like he likes the game to please his dents and make it sound like he's not miserable when playing, but then he lets the mask slip every so often and lets you know that he isn't having fun and is just putting on a facade. It's just the dishonesty that I have no respect for, and that was my problem before he even started playing Baldur's Gate 3, because he was always making excuses as to why he wasn't playing the game. Oh, the schedule is super packed. Oh, people aren't gonna show up. When the reality is he just didn't want to play it because it's not his style of game, which is totally fine. You just have to say that. You have to man up and have the courage to acknowledge that fact, which he doesn't have. Because as much as DSP likes to pretend that he doesn't care what people think about him and that he's Mr. Honesty, he's actually a huge coward who just wants to make sure that everybody likes him.
There's some things I think are not done so well, and as you know, I've been vocal in my criticism of those things over the course of the playthrough. And the thing is, I have the right to do that. I have the right to criticize any game, And I will. I'm not going to pull punches. I'm not going to hold back when it comes to things that I feel about any particular game that I play.
I just can't stand the way that he says that he has a right to have an opinion and he has a right to vocalize that opinion when it comes to these video games. As if it's actually written into the Constitution somewhere that DSP is allowed to have an opinion about a video game. He just sounds stupid. It's not that deep, man. It doesn't have to be about rights. Whether or not you're even allowed to have an opinion about a game is not up for debate, in all honesty. You can think whatever you want about the game. But when you have dumb opinions, when you say things that don't actually have anything to back them up, people are going to call you out for it. And that's exactly what happens with Baldur's Gate 3 time after time. Every time that he has a critique about the game, people will tell him that it's designed that way on purpose for a subset of people who enjoy it that way, and he just says that it sucks and he doesn't like it, which I guess is fair enough, but if that's the case, then you need to quit playing the game and move on. Sorry, I'm kind of jumping ahead. I'll let him cook.
But in regards to Baldur's Gate 3, I am well aware that there is an audience of this game that absolutely love it and think it's like the best game ever made. All right, I beg to differ. I like the game. I'm not in love with it. I think that it has many shortcomings or things that could have been improved. I think a lot of the the situational dialogue is incredibly cringeworthy and written essentially for like immature people. And the way that various things are presented in the game is poor. You know, not really having a proper tutorial for 90% of the gameplay mechanics. So you need to either research or have someone tell you how to play the game. Meh.
When it comes to DSP's opinion about the Baldur's Gate 3 dialogue, I just have no respect for his opinion, because I don't honestly think that he knows how two people interact. He doesn't know what normal dialogue sounds like between two human beings in the real world, being that he does not experience what the real world is like pretty much ever at this point. The only person that he talks to is his wife Ket, who's gonna constantly agree with him no matter what because he pays all of the bills. And he only leaves his house but once a week, so you really think he's getting any sort of meaningful dialogue style interaction with real human beings? I don't think so. Besides, he says that the dialogue is written for immature people, like he isn't the immature person, like he isn't the one that's constantly talking about dicks and scat humor. I just don't know how much more immature it can really get aside from DSP. He's about the lowest rung on the ladder, if you ask me. I've seen actual teenage boys have a better sense of humor than DSP. Which I guess brings us to his second complaint so far, which is that there's no tutorial for 90% of the game mechanics, which is completely incorrect. The game has a plethora of tutorials that pop up when you experience things in different mechanics, and all you have to do is take the time to read and actually comprehend the words that you read. The problem is that DSP doesn't have any basic reading comprehension skills, so of course he didn't exactly grasp the concepts that they were trying to convey. Not only does he lack basic reading comprehension, but he also lacks any sort of intrinsic curiosity within him to figure out the mechanics by himself and figure out how to utilize them to his best advantage. And as rare as it is, Baldur's Gate 3 is actually a game that greatly benefits from having that sort of curiosity. Having that understanding how gameplay mechanics can intertwine with each other and be utilized together to create something so much more. But DSP's not looking for a game like that. He's not looking in utilizing these skills. He's not interested in even reading. He just wants to press a button and win. That's all he's ever really wanted. That's why anytime that he mentions a problem with the game, I'm always very cautious about what he thinks would make it better. Because DSP's not actually interested in any sort of intricacy when it comes to a video game. Hell, half the time he's not even interested in having any fun with it. All he really wants is a game that's short and has a fun story that he can understand. And that's really the key part, is a story that he can understand, because there's plenty of games that have had absolutely fantastic stories that DSP just didn't enjoy because he was just kind of too stupid to understand what was going on. Sorry, we kind of got off track. Romance bad, tutorials not included. Got it. What else, DSP?
You know, a lot of these ridiculous relationships that spring up out of nowhere, even though you've done absolutely nothing close or romantic with any of the cast, all of a sudden they want to jump your bones and sleep with you. That's pretty bad. It's pretty cringeworthy writing for, again, people who feel like they've never had a relationship before. And I have the right to criticize this kind of stuff, but there's people out there who disagree, and that's okay. I just wish that everyone out there understood that people can have different opinions of you, and that's okay. Like, if you like that stuff, I'm okay with it.
But you're very clearly not okay with it, DSP, because every time it comes on the screen, you feel the need to put down people who enjoy it. You feel the need to call it out and act as though it's an actual flaw of the game rather than just something that you don't enjoy. That's why it's so ironic that you tell everybody that they have to respect your right to have an opinion, but yet you sit here and disrespect everybody who has a differing opinion from you. It's like if you went to a sandwich shop with a friend, and you always order the Italian and he orders the turkey club, and you tell him that everybody has a right to their opinion on which sandwich they want to eat, but that he just has to respect your choice to pick the Italian. But the second that you go up to the counter to order, you sit there and say derogatory things about anybody that's ordering a turkey club. Quickly, it's made clear that you're not actually meaning what you say, and instead you just want people to not shit on you for having a terrible take. And if that's all you want, DSP, if you just don't want people to call you out for your bad takes, I'd recommend just getting offline, because that's all the internet is going to do for the rest of the time that the internet exists, really. People on the internet are gonna let you know when your opinion is bad. It's just the way it's always been.
As I've told you guys, I feel like this game, it's its own niche, right? Kind of like FromSoft games. There's people out there who absolutely hate FromSoft games because they feel that they're too difficult, right? But if you take the time to study and learn how these FromSoft game works and how all their mechanics are, they're masterpieces, right? But they're not for everybody. And I kind of feel the same way about Baldur's Gate 3, yet Baldur's Gate 3 overwhelmingly won Game of the Year. Why? We could sit here and argue about this till the cows come home. But in my opinion, it's because basically the game has some of this immature stuff. Like people, oh, wait a minute. Almost a high level, very complex, very nerdy RPG, you know, D&D, but oh my god, you could sleep with bears? Yeah, and? To me, it's like, what does that matter, right?
And for 90% of the audience that plays Baldur's Gate 3, it doesn't matter. You are the one that's making this a bigger deal than it actually is. When people who play Baldur's Gate 3 get together, they might discuss the romance options that they picked in their playthroughs and why. Because it's a meme, it's a thing in the community that they all have in common. And it's a way to start talking about the different characters that are in the game and which ones you do and don't like and for what reasons. But DSP immediately went for the example where you can sleep with Halsin and where he becomes a bear. Because that's the actual meme on the internet, right? That's the big one. That's the one that everybody was talking about because it is just kind of a WTF style moment. It's supposed to be attention grabbing. It's supposed to be kind of wacky. It's fun. But like I said, DSP's not actually interested in having fun with a video game. But to sit here and act like Baldur's Gate 3 only won Game of the Year, or at least in part won Game of the Year simply because it has romance options, is honestly absurd to me. Because once again, if you actually talk to anybody who plays Baldur's Gate 3, it's very rare that you're going to spend any sort of time actually talking about romance options other than these are interesting characters that you can get attached to in the same way that you would get attached to any character in a video game that you enjoy. But DSP's made uncomfortable by any sort of romantic dialogue at all, so of course we have to hear about it.
To me, my focus, honestly, my favorite part of this game is the incredible amount of narrative and content in it. Like some people have said, this game kind of feels like almost the spiritual successor to Witcher 3, where everything you run into is kind of important and meaningful. Now, you can skip a lot of it and it won't really affect the overall course of the game, but if you take your time to do every little piece of stuff you discover, it actually feels very rich and like a very complex world. I completely agree. I'm happy that in the way that I've been playing Baldur's Gate 3, that I've been taking my time to do all the content I run into, and I haven't really skipped anything, right? I mean, that's why I'm 70-some hours in and we're still in Act 2.
The game is definitely long and everybody plays at their own pace, that's for sure. But let's not sit here and act like you're 70 hours in and only on Act 2 because the game is that long and meaningful to you. Let's not sit here and act like you're not being handheld the entire time and constantly reading chat so that everybody can make every decision for you. And that's before we even take into consideration all of the time that we spend manually updating the leaderboard and doing shoutouts, of course. Like I said, everybody plays at their own pace, but let's be honest about why your playtime is the way it is, DSP. Let's not misrepresent what's going on.
So, I love that about the game. But why is it that every time you hear someone talk about Baldur's Gate 3, you hear about who is your waifu or husbando in the game, and how many bears did you bang, and you know what I'm saying? It's stupid. Why is the discourse so dumb and immature when the game has so much more than that to offer?
Because it's fun, it's wacky, it's weird, it's unique, DSP. It's something different from every other game. It's a running meme in the community. It's part of the culture of Baldur's Gate 3 because it's in the game and it's unique and it's weird and everybody's experienced these things. And I really don't see why it's such a big deal for you because you're not talking to any of these people. You don't have any friends that you're discussing Baldur's Gate 3 with. You're not talking to strangers about Baldur's Gate 3 in any sort of capacity. So you're really sitting here being upset about how other people are talking about a game amongst themselves when you're not even in the conversation. Do you see how strange and petty that sounds? Do you understand how that has nothing to do with you and you should just move on with your life and do what you want to do? Of course not. This is the level 1 pre-stream where we spend exorbitant amounts of time talking about things that we hate for no reason instead of actually moving on and playing the games that we're supposed to be playing for the content that we apparently love to be making.
I don't know. Anyway, I still like the game, and I'm enjoying it. And like I said, we actually had some really good progress back on Wednesday where we did a bunch of optional questing that seems like it all could have been easily skippable. But man, I'm happy I did it. You know, we rescued Nathaniel and fused him with Oliver. And in addition to that, we actually went to a couple optional dungeons. We found the H0rny temple and did some puzzles and combat in there. It was all good. But now today, as we continue on, we're going back to Last Light, and we're going to go to the second floor of the inn, and apparently that opens up a whole new line of questing, so we'll see where that goes today. But great stuff on Wednesday, okay?
Yeah, great stuff, DSP. Very robust, very meaningful. Everybody is having fun. It's great.
And I'll say this too. Thank you to those of you who are tuning into the playthrough and enjoying it still now, because, you know, 70 hours in, a lot of people tend to get tuned out or bored. And I know that there's still a decent group of people following along. Totally not as many as when I started. You know, take a look at the videos from when I started. Each had thousands of views. Now, I could barely pull 300 views after a few days on each video. But I think that's because a lot of people are essentially jumping in, you know, and trying to follow along. And dude, 70 plus hours of any playthrough takes a long time to get through. I feel like the views will catch up eventually as the viewers catch up, right?
Yeah, I'm convinced that you have to be delusional to think that the views are ever gonna catch up to where they started. Because his Baldur's Gate 3 playthrough is just boring as sin. It's like a dose of the strongest sleep medication that you could take, but instantly. But of course, he couldn't show any sort of appreciation for the people who are actually showing up on the stream every single day without sounding like a complete ass. I know that you guys are constantly showing up to the stream and always hitting the tier 2 goal every single time that we play Baldur's Gate 3, but the views on the VODs, they're just not making it, man. They're just not as high as they need to be. Never mind the fact that the Baldur's Gate 3 streams are the only ones that are showing any sort of consistency when it comes to support. No, DSP, just completely ignore that and continue to harp on the fact that nobody's watching your shitty videos on demand. People love that.
So there you go. I just find it's hilarious because now people, of course, in the chat are saying, so you're saying the only reason this game won Game of the Year is because it has sexual content. No, but I'm going to make another comparison. And I challenge you on this one to disprove it. There's a game coming out in a month or two called Stellar Blade. Okay? You know it. It's that action game where it's a lot of flashy combat and a lot of... Oh, wait, no one knows that. All you know is that the main character is this anime chick, right?
Okay, instantly debunked, DSP. I heard about this game far before you started talking about it, and I knew exactly what kind of game it was going to be. So now you look stupid, huh?
And if you actually have been listening recently in the last week or two, all the PR about the game is about the main character and how she looks. No exaggeration, even the game developers have come out and admitted, they said, yes, we based that character on a Korean model, and yes, we actually spent arduous hours modeling her ass cheeks so that she would look the most attractive. It's like, yes, because you're selling your game on the sexual content of the main character.
Plenty of games base their character models off of actors and models. It's completely normal in the industry. DSP, I don't know what you're talking about. And as far as spending arduous hours on just her ass cheeks, at least they're focusing on making their game look as true to life as possible. Isn't that what you want out of video games all of the time? You're the biggest graphics whore that I know when it comes to people who play video games online for a living. Everybody else is completely fine just playing a plethora of games that look however they look and just having fun with them. You are the one who is constantly complaining about 60 FPS and graphics. But go ahead and switch up now because it suits your agenda.
You're not selling your game on the game. If Stellar Blade had a main character that was a regular dude with two swords, no one would give two shits about this game. It would probably have no hype. It would just be another game amongst a million of these kind of games that no one really cares about. But whenever you make a Bayonetta or you make a Stellar Blade or you do that, all of a sudden, now everyone talks about it. Why? Because of the sexual content in the game. Period. So, go ahead and try to tell me that the reason people didn't talk about Baldur's Gate 3 as much as they did was the sexual content. I dare you to lie.
Aside from the sleeping with a bear thing, Baldur's Gate 3's discourse was never really about the romance options. I don't know who you were talking to. I don't know where you were getting your information from. When I bought Baldur's Gate 3, it was because I heard that it was a fantastic RPG. When I bought Baldur's Gate 3, I bought it because I was told that the developers were actively listening to the fans and gave out a complete game that was well worth the $60. So you can sit here and say that I'm lying all I want, but everybody knows that you're the one who's being a weirdo about everything. You're You're the one who just can't stand when women are on screen for some reason. You can't stand any sort of romantic dialogue happening in a video game because your love life is weird for some reason. You were desperately trying to make this a problem for everybody else except for you, when the problem is entirely on you.
Because that's the truth. Yes, the game is outstanding. Yes, it has a lot of great content. Yes, it's complex and have D&D elements, and that's a unique thing. But the reason people talked about it was the sexual content. Deal with it.
What a clown. He says deal with it as he takes his triumphant sip from his trusty Vault 13 canteen. Coming from the guy who's constantly banning every single person who dares disagree with him in his own chat. Dude lives in an isolated bubble and has the audacity to act like he's high and mighty over everybody else, and he's speaking nothing but the facts. Go outside, DSP. Go breathe some fresh air for once instead of that musty, dusty, moldy ass room you sit in.
Okay, continuing on. That's my opinion, not the truth. All right, and again, you have the right to disagree with me if that's what you feel. But what was the discourse about this game and Stellar Blade now? Just look at the discourse. Wow, look at that amazing combo. Look at that really cool combat engine. Literally no one. Literally no one. It's just a bunch of people mouth drooling over the main character.
I'd also like to point out that one of the first things that you notice about a video game are the visuals. So when you're seeing the character model and you're seeing what the game looks like, that's what you're going to pick up and be able to judge as accurately as possible first. Because you really don't know about that combat engine until you play in it. You don't know about the game mechanics in the world until you're playing the game. But the character models, the actual graphics of the game, yes, you can absolutely judge those before you get your hands on it, assuming that you're looking at actual gameplay. Because you don't have to feel the graphics, you just have to look at them, and you can do that far before playing the game. So yeah, I'm not surprised that the visuals of the game are being talked about far before any of the other features of the game, because the game isn't out yet and nobody has their hands on it to talk about anything else in depth. But of course, DSP isn't interested in talking about these little things. DSP's not talking about the real reason why people might be doing the things that they're doing. Instead, he just loves to strawman a reason so that he can argue with it. Because that's the only way he ever wins an argument. That's the only way he ever has anything valid to say, is when he creates a straw man so that he can argue against it.
That's modern gaming at this point, I guess, right? And the thing is, it's not just games. This has happened in every entertainment industry. An entire movie where the only reason people saw the movie was because of the title actor or actress, correct? This has happened countless times.
But I think in the form of the film industry, DSP, it's not because they're super attractive, typically. There's definitely those instances, but I think it has more to do with their acting chops. I think that people go and see these movies with major lead actors like Leonardo DiCaprio or George Clooney. They go see these movies to specifically see these people because they're good actors, not because of the way they look. So you're just kind of conflating the two when it's really not the same thing at all.
But it's okay to acknowledge it and admit it instead of trying to pretend like the reason that you like something is something that's not there, right? Well, instead of admitting that, yes, we all just kind of have a weakness for this thing, instead we're going to try to justify it and pretend like it's this or this or this or this or this. Well, here's the thing. Again, then what I want you to do is I want you to take that element out of it. I want you to take all the sexual content out of Baldur's Gate 3. I want you to take it all out of Stellar Blade and tell me that you would like the game as much.
Okay, easy, absolutely. I would enjoy Baldur's Gate 3 even if there was no romance options. I would enjoy Baldur's Gate 3 if there was no women characters. I would enjoy Baldur's Gate 3 if there was no men characters. Any way you want to make the game, DSP, it doesn't matter as long as there are characters that are just as interesting, as long as there is a story that is just as interesting, as long as there are gameplay mechanics as in-depth and interesting as in Baldur's Gate 3, yes, I'm gonna like the game, romance or not. I don't know who you think you're dunking on. I don't know who you're talking to. I haven't met these people, but when I do, I'll let you know.
Because you'd be lying to yourself. It's true. I'm sorry. I'm enjoying the games on face value without that content because that's not what I'm looking for in video games. My opinion on that stuff is different than you, and that's fine. But I just find it absolutely hilarious that when I legitimately criticize something, like when I say, my God, the dialogue of Baldur's Gate 3 when it comes to the relationships and this kind of romance is so cringy. It's so not close to what any human would actually say. It's as if the writers don't even know what people talk like when it comes to romance. Yeah, it's true.
Once again, I have to point out the fact that I don't think that DSP knows what real people talk like. I don't think that DSP knows what real romance dialogue would sound like either. He's not the guy to ask. I mean, you're looking at a guy whose wife couldn't even acknowledge one positive attribute that she liked about him while on the stream. She said he's funny with a question mark. She didn't even know if he was funny. But you're meaning to tell me that this guy understands what a romantic dialogue would sound like between two real style individuals? I'm not buying it, not for 1 second. You couldn't convince me no matter what you said.
And that's a legit criticism of the game. I'm not saying the game's bad, but I have a right to say that. And then people get all uppity about it. Ooh, well, too fucking bad. Too bad. Just because you don't like the fact that someone is exposing something doesn't mean it's not true. That's a hard fact of life. As you get older, you realize stuff like this, right? Anyway.
LOL, exposing something, like he's outed some sort of big secret. He's uncovered the truth and letting everybody know. Also, just blindly assuming that everything that he says is true because it was an original thought that he had, apparently. Damn anybody else who came before or after him that had a differing opinion, because they don't know what they're talking about. The guy spoke, and his word is obviously law around here. And I gotta point out that he's again telling his audience that this is something that you learn as you get older, acknowledging, at least to me, that he knows that his audience is made of younger style people, which makes me really wonder about the effects of constant pignosis on an adolescent brain. I mean, we all see how Derek is turning out. I don't think we need any more of those.
So anyway, Eternal Napalm says, you don't think the combat and bosses in Stellar Blade look cool? Again, I didn't say that. What I'm saying is, who's talking about that? Literally no one. All you got to do is go look at the trends on social media and things. No one cares. The only people buying that game, okay, not the only people. A lot of people buying that game will be buying it solely on the fact of the main character's attractiveness. That's it. That's it.
But again, what does that have to do with you, DSP, even if that is the case? But way to move the goalpost mid-sentence, asshole. Because first you say it's everybody, and then you backtrack and say it's most people. And I have to ask DSP, what is a specific number that you could throw out that would make you happy? How many people have to be buying the game not for the main character to satisfy you? Because you ask who's talking about these things. The people in your chat are talking about these things. The person that you just addressed in your very chat is the person who's telling you that the gameplay looks good. So there's at least one person. If 100 people in your chat all chimed in at once telling you that they weren't interested in the main character and instead in the gameplay mechanics, would you concede your point? Would you acknowledge that you were wrong? Of course not. Of course you wouldn't do that. Because everything that he says is correct, obviously. Sound good? Sounds good to me. And by the way, Cat agrees.
And it's time to admit this. As a society, this is where we're going. People fall for this shit. It's a silly trap that people fall for all the time. I mean, hell, let's be honest, the Tomb Raider games, back in the day, they weren't great. Run around, auto-aim, shoot wildly at a bunch of enemies, and then terrible platforming that was incredibly frustrating. The games didn't get good until many iterations later. The first one actually is a really rough game that's very frustrating. I bought it, owned it, and was like, I don't see the hype. But of course, Lara Croft, right? So there you have it.
So was that DSP acknowledging that he fell for the exact same marketing tactic when it came to Tomb Raider back in the day? He fell for the Lara Croft triangular yonkers? And I love how quick he is to shirk off any sort of positives that Tomb Raider might have had back in the day. Maybe it hasn't aged the best, I don't know, I haven't played the first Tomb Raider in actual ages, but it was definitely robust and meaningful at the time, and definitely is the reason why so many action platformers exist to this very day. And I mean, it had to have something going for it, being that it spawned the entire series that is Tomb Raider. But of course, DSP says that they only bought it because Lara Croft had some triangular yonkers, so that's what we have to go with. Like I said, he makes the rules.
Anyway, let's continue, shall we? All right, so if you think this is insufferable, then you don't have to watch. I'm a 41-year-old dude, and I'm going to have different takes than the vast majority of people in the gaming industry. That's why people watch me. They're not watching me to hear the same thing you hear every shill say in every other stream or every other piece of content. So if you disagree, it's fine. You can disagree, but don't sit here and criticize and say that my opinions are invalid, because they are. Everyone's opinion is valid, right?
Well, DSP, that person's opinion is that you're insufferable, and nobody is watching you because you have these extraordinary takes that are outside of the industry standard that they find super unique. If they're following you and watching you because of your opinion, it's to point and laugh at you because you're an absolute clown who makes a mockery of yourself every single day, constantly proving to everybody exactly why you are the lolcow that you are, constantly proving that you are a child in a 41-year-old man's body. But for the record, I 100% agree with whatever chatter that was. This is insufferable. DSP in general is always insufferable, but this so much more than normal.
Okay. No, I disagree. I think Tomb Raider 1 was not very good. I think Tomb Raider 2 and 3 got much better. Later on, the later iterations actually got bad. But I think 2 and 3 got much better. But 1, man, I still remember it to this day how frustrated I was playing it. And I owned it. And I was frustrated at how annoying parts of it were because they didn't really put too much... Okay, let me put it this way. It could have definitely been designed better, but you could tell there's certain parts of the game they focused on and certain parts of the games they rushed because they didn't care as much. Anyway.
Well, I'm going to have to chalk that up to user error, DSP, just like I always do whenever it comes to any sort of gameplay issues that you have while playing video games. Because more often than not, that's a correct assumption, because you just don't know how to play video games and you're not good at them. But that's going to be it for today's video. Of course, another big ups to Snort Hogan for the clip in this one. As always, I appreciate it, brother. Shout out to everybody who watched the video, especially if you made it this far. A special big ups to all of my members. I love you all so much. Thank you, thank you. But hopefully I'll catch all of you guys in the next video. But until then, make sure that you check out other detractor channels and dive deeper into that. Snortex.